The outbreak of COVID-19 has had an extraordinary impact on the global economy and triggered widespread social upheaval. Worldwide, clients, investors, analysts, market watchers, and citizens are grappling with uncertainty and in need of insight to guide their decision-making. Starting this week, the Aga Khan Economic Planning Board for the United Kingdom is launching a series of pre-recorded webinars, Managing Through Disruption. Designed to help answer the questions that matter, we discuss the impact that COVID-19 has had on Jamaati businesses, self-employed, and landlords. Jamaati members share their experiences and their unique perspectives on the outbreak's effects and how they are repositioning their businesses for the future. These recordings are available on the.ismaili. You are watching Managing Through Disruption, Strategy for Commercial Landlords. On the panel, we have Karim Pabani, Director of Bainmark Property and Chartered Surveyor, expertise in commercial property and portfolio investment management and asset enhancement. Karim Virani, Commercial Property Solicitor and Investor, as well as a member of the Legal Committee. This session is being moderated by Aleem Tejani, EPB Board Member, responsible for business support.
So the coronavirus lockdown has obviously had severe implications for retailers and other businesses. Karim V, can you tell us about some of the measures the UK government have put into place to assist commercial tenants?
Good morning, Yali. There are some quite substantial grants coming out from the government for businesses with a rateable value of up to £15,000. There's due to be possibly already out a £10,000 cheque coming to the tenants, and for businesses with a rateable value between £15,000 and £51,000, there's a £25,000 cheque. There's also been some liquidity put into the banking system, and there are business rates holidays for, I believe, 12 months, the entire 2020-21 period.
And what's the position on forfeiting a commercial lease?
Okay, so the government has actually precluded that action. So the landlord can't rely on his usual right to forfeiture to go in and change the locks when rent has been outstanding for 14 or 21 days is typical in the lease drafting. However, there are other measures that can be taken if you want to take a strong stance. You do need to proceed with caution and decide whether that is the sensible course of action. But, you can have legal letters, you can follow the letter of the lease, and there will be a right to charge interest on late payments. And you can also issue statutory demands on the tenant, which can be a precursor to, bankruptcy for an individual or, winding up a company. But again, those are quite strong measures, and you need to decide whether that is appropriate for the particular circumstances.
So a commercial landlord can't forfeit the lease. Was it for 3 months?
Yeah, 3 months. And also, the bailiffs and all that, they have been all put on a proceed with caution, because the government doesn't want to see, everything shutting down, because people are being unreasonable.
So Karim, I know you talked a bit about the legal position, but if we can expand on that, please. Is a tenant eligible for rent reduction or able to terminate their lease due to coronavirus?
No, they're not. Every business has got fixed costs and variable costs, and quite frankly, their lease obligations, fall very firmly under fixed costs. But you've got to also look at whether the tenant is able to pay, and these are totally unprecedented times. I mean, if a tenant is in a retail position and has no income, you do need to have some sympathy for the independents. So I think perhaps we all need to consider pragmatic approaches, and maybe there's an option to defer part. Maybe there's an option to think about, breaking quarterly rent into monthly rent, things like that. You've just got to think that if you lost your tenant, you're then going to have void rates to suffer. You're going to have letting fees, legal fees, loss of income, give out a new rent-free period. And quite frankly, is it better, even if you did have to give out 3 months rent-free? And not that I'm saying that the tenant has a right to it, but it may be that could be the best option for the landlord.
Okay, so that's a more pragmatic commercial view, but just finally finishing on the legal side of it, could a tenant claim that coronavirus is a force majeure situation which allows them to end the lease?
I think not. I mean, obviously things like this have to be decided by the courts. I don't think that it could be force majeure because, inshallah, it's only temporary. So it will pass, and temporary blips shouldn't frustrate a lease.
Okay, so the legal position is pretty clear that a tenant has to carry on paying the rent.
Correct.
So Karim, I'm going to bring you in here, and we talked a little bit about the real life pragmatic situation. We hear in the press that there are a lot of tenants who are refusing to pay their rent or can't pay the rent because of cash flow issues. So Karim mentioned a few things about how else are commercial landlords working with their tenants to reach a pragmatic solution.
Yes, I think, as we said before, these are unprecedented times. And one of the first things a commercial landlord may do in these times is reach to the phone to phone their insurers for loss of rent insurance. And it's quite obvious that in this particular case, and in the case of earlier episodes where there were pandemics like SARS, it's not covered because you just can't anticipate the scale and the size of it. So you have to think about other ways. Working with your tenants, commercial tenants, you can see very quickly, you'll know, behave in the same way as a lender would behave. You're a landlord, you're on the owner side, if you like. Are there a tenant that can't pay genuinely because of unprecedented circumstances and them having to close their businesses? Or do they simply want to take advantage and not pay? Are they a much larger organization who could probably take 3 or 4 months? Whatever the position, the legal position is that you can't issue forfeiture proceedings and you can't discriminate between big and small tenants. So you are in the same boat with both types of tenants. As a landlord, we've been receiving letters from tenants and emails asking for at least 3 months rent-free periods rather than anything else. So one of the ways that we're not obliged to give them those rent-free periods, and we always say to them that the rent is due and payable. However, as we've said before, there are ways in which you can discuss with your tenants more approaches that can actually work better for both of you.
Can you expand on that, Karim?
Sure. So one of the ways that Karim V mentioned earlier is if you have a lease with standard quarterly payments, you can look at easing cash flow through agreeing monthly payments. That's one way of looking at it. Another way is to actually work more closely with your tenants and say, because some of the tenants haven't closed down, it's only essential businesses are still open. So you could ask to see their accounts, look at their cash flow projections, and come up with a way, a payment plan which allows them some flexibility in these coming months, but then they do pay it off over a longer period. You could also encourage them to use the government support available. And Karen V talked about the business rate holidays and the small business loans, which are all being administered through the local authorities. You should also consider if you don't work with your tenants, that there is a possibility, especially with some of the smaller tenants, that they may just drop off the keys. It affects the surrender of the lease. And then as a commercial landlord, you have to think about the fact that you will have a lengthy void period. When you have to relet, you will have to grant incentives for new tenants to come in. You will have empty business rates liabilities, non-recoverable service charge, and utility bills, not to mention the agency fees in hiring a new commercial agent to get your property let. So all of these things, costs and incentives, could add up to way more than a 3-month payment plan or a 3-month rent-free period. So do think very, very carefully before, and do talk to your tenant, and do try, because they are in a very difficult situation, just as you are, because these are unprecedented times.
So, Karim Birani, if we consider the cash flow impact for commercial landlords, clearly rent-free periods affect your own cash flow. So what are commercial landlords doing to manage their cash flow?
I mean, we're doing our best not to give out rent-free periods, I would say. In our own portfolio, in some cases, we are managing to agree deferments of rent. So we either have monthly rent, or we allow tenants to, pay when things get a little bit better, or pay when the government grants get through. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of government help for the actual occupiers and the businesses, but there isn't so much for landlords. And I think that really needs to be brought home to the tenants, in this whole, economic cycle. The fact that, the grants and help are being given to the businesses, well, that kind of suggests that for that reason, those businesses should continue paying their landlords.
And Karim P, on the financing side, how supportive have your commercial lenders been? Have they given you any relief?
I think they'll have a look at your history in terms of your payments. And I think there is a discussion to be had, because they understand that many of the tenants that landlords have rely on footfall, especially on the retail and the food and beverage sector. And I think it depends on your portfolio. I think a lender will take the view that if the premises are open and rent is coming in, they may ask to see your financials. So I think it's very much horses for courses. I think the lenders will look at it on a case-by-case basis. And as we saw, even on the residential side, buy-to-let lenders are still working it out. It's not, you can simply assume that you'll get a rent payment holiday. You have to speak to your lender, and they'll probably ask you for financials and a situation before they make a decision, because even when you do take out loans, they're very, very specific to the borrower and the type of investment, and the industry and the sector. So that's my advice at the moment. But please do pick up the phone to them if you're having difficulties in paying your commercial mortgage.
Have either of you been successful in negotiating mortgage holidays?
I have seen banks very readily offering them. It's a situation that if you do take up these holidays, and the health warning that must be given is, if you take up these rent holidays or capital repayment holidays, I should say, excuse me, you're going to be paying interest on that extra money, and the term of repayment on your loan will be extended. So bear that in mind. That it could work. Obviously, it will work out more expensive, but there's also an advantage to having cash in hand, just in case one of your tenants fail or there are other problems in your portfolio. So you need to be cautious, be prudent, consider everything carefully.
Yeah, that's a good point. So looking ahead, looking beyond the lockdown measures currently in place, do you think that the coronavirus may lead to a fundamental shift in behavior that could affect the demand for commercial space? So, for example, the coronavirus has further increased the shift to online shopping, and some businesses may conclude that actually working from home is a feasible and cheaper alternative to renting office space. What are your views? Perhaps we start with Karim P.
So I think we saw from the last major economic downturn what effects that had on co-working in the office sector. And even before the coronavirus, we've seen online and other um, scenarios having an effect on the high street, and the changing nature of the occupiers on the high street and the more traditional retailing, some of it being moved online. So I think what we may see is a rebalancing of uses on the high street. And I think for commercial landlords, think about the size and the location of the properties that you have in your portfolio or that you're going to be buying, and think about who the end user is, because that could change. I mean, we've seen some very, very big companies pre-coronavirus and during coronavirus actually go into administration. Bankable.
You've seen Debenhams and Carluccio's, right?
Yeah, bankable, what you would consider to be quality covenants, and you can't rely on those. You've even seen high street retailers in the coronavirus period that you would have thought could cover 2 or 3 months rent, saying that they want 3 to 6 months rent free. So I think what that may lead to is what we're seeing anyway, and Karim V will come in on the legal side: shorter, more flexible leases. Areas where larger units are on the high street, we may see what we saw in the office sector in terms of permitted development. And I know we are seeing that in smaller high streets, permitted development to residential, to more uses like leisure, for example, where demand is. And we also may see the emergence of what I call co-retailing, where common users in a particular industry like food and beverage may come together in larger units and have a lower per retailer cost base by sharing certain services, but by co-locating together. And we've seen that around the world as well, in some European cities as well.
Karim V, let's hear your thoughts on this.
I mean, there are some very widely accepted trends in commercial real estate, you know, that the high street has been in decline because of the rise of the internet. The big companies big companies with office space, they're requiring fewer desk spaces per employee. So they might now have 0.7 desks per employee because people work from home or people work out the office. And also shorter leases. You know, that has been a trend for a long time. And I think this coronavirus will really accelerate in all of those three areas, because people, to an extent, have proven that they can work from home. You know, this corona uncertainty has proven that companies would rather not have been paying their rent. So they would rather have been, you know, in flexible arrangements. And obviously the high street is, you know, quite widely known to be in decline. So yeah, corona will have, you know, structural changes that will filter through and continue to you know, change the shape of commercial real estate. But I mean, at the end of the day, you know, we're in a strong market in the UK, generally speaking, in the global context. So, you know, it's not as though demand can totally fall away. With regard to predictions for the future and where things will go, I mean, I think the next 3 months are going to be difficult times because there is much less cash in the system. You know, people's investments are struggling. People's incomes have been prejudiced, you know. Everyone is in a difficult place. So I think across the board, you know, with less liquidity, even though the banks are in a good position, apparently, you know, prices have to go down, and that may well at some point allow the banks to ask, you know, the dreaded LTV question, you know, who is on the right side of the covenant and who is not, and then fire sales. So I think for the time being, everyone needs to be very prudent, keep a little bit of a buffer where they can, you know, be careful. There will be sharks around trying to, you know, give great deals, or help people claim these grants where the local authorities are supposedly just going to send them out. It's about a good time to be cautious. Keep your ear to the ground. Continue to do your research, but above all, be cautious, because the banks can turn on you at any time, and when they've got problems, which may well happen, they want to increase their bottom line and make more money.
Yeah, that's a great point. Karim P, you talked about one of the solutions to all of this is to reposition your commercial properties. You said turning larger office or larger commercial space into smaller commercial space. You talked about permitted development. Can you just expand on that? What do you mean exactly by that, and how might that help commercial landlords?
I think I would answer this in two ways. One, with the permitted development that we saw from offices to resi, and there's also a lot of changes afoot in the planning system that are being talked about now to look at more uses which are more relevant, not just to the high street, but towns and cities up and down the country. And I think we should look at the research being done, because ultimately, whilst this is a negative time for all of us, it should also be seen as a time to bunker down and look for opportunities in the future. I'll give an example of how we can restructure leases. Does your tenant need all of the space that they currently occupy, and they've been in your property for the last 10 or 15 years? Can you restructure those leases so that you can take some space back, refurbish, redevelop for another use? And in that way, it moves your income stream from just having one income stream to three, and it diversifies your risk in a particular property. On the permitted development side, we already know around the world there are high street units being turned into residential. We see it in smaller towns and cities here as well, especially where you've got neighbourhood shops, for example. That may well come in on a much broader scale. So keep afoot of the changes in planning and government legislation and where demand is going. And one sector that we haven't talked about too much here is industrial and distribution and out of town. With the current crisis, on the move to online retailing has further accelerated. And where do these people store all their stock? There is a demand for out of town, and actually around London, a lot of that demand was taken up with housing. So it's moving out to further than the home counties in the southeast and further outside of cities. So we should have a look at areas of opportunity for those kind of uses that maybe we never had in our portfolios. Maybe we were a traditional landlord with retail and residential uppers. We should look at other opportunities that are outside of retailing and food and beverage.
So we've talked about a lot of things today. Karim V, if you just want to wrap it up with one key message you want to get across to whoever's watching this video. Yeah,
I think proceed with caution. There's a lot of gurus talking about what's going to be the shape of, the dip. Is it going to be a swoosh? Is it going to be a U? Is it going to be an L? I mean, we don't know. Just proceed with caution. Keep that buffer and survive the next 3 months. Have those dialogues with your lenders. Have those dialogues with your tenants. Work out the best way forward. Be pragmatic, and be careful.
Great. Gentlemen, on behalf of the Economic Planning Board, I want to thank you both for your time and valuable insights you provided today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.